Good afternoon. It's 1 p.m. So we're going to begin today's Planning Advisory Committee meeting. Just before we start, I'll just go through, as per COVID procedures, it's just myself, the chair, and the recording secretary, Deputy Clerk Joel Watts. In council chambers, the committee and staff and the public are all joining us by Zoom. So with us today for the committee, we've got Mayor Andy Latham, Deputy Mayor Patrick O'Reilly, Councillor Kathleen Seymour Fagan, and Mike Barkwell. So at this point, I would ask for a motion to adopt the agenda today. Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, seconded by Councillor Seymour Fagan. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. So that brings us to number 2, declarations of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we'll move into the public meeting reports today. So just as a reminder, as required under the Planning Act, a public meeting is being held prior to the committee making a recommendation on these applications. The purpose of this public hearing is to allow the committee to gather information on the applications before us, to hear those wishing to make oral submissions on the applications, and to allow the committee to ask questions of the applicants, interested parties, and staff. Everyone who makes a presentation at this meeting is requested to provide their name for the public record. In the interest of time, the committee respectfully asks that you keep your presentation to no more than 5 minutes. When called, please turn on your video and turn off your mute and state your name. All reports or all applications heard today are just recommendations that will be forwarded to the April 20th regular council meeting. So at this time, we'll begin with 3.1, an application to amend the Township of Emily zoning bylaw 1996-30 for 67, 73, 79, and 85 Lakeview Crescent, geographic Township of Emily. Jonathan, you're up.
Good afternoon, Planning and Advisory Committee and Mr. Chair. This will be real brief. This application, as of 1 p.m. yesterday, has been retracted by the applicant. So due to further investigation around the proposed setback, specifically with regard to the minimum distance separation criteria, there turned out to be more livestock on the subject or on the site nearby, 2217 Pigeon Lake Road, than originally assumed to be. So therefore, the proposed setback of 162 became 182. The current setback is 188. So that's only be a 6 meter difference in terms of amendment. So to confirm, this application has been withdrawn, and I will be issuing a follow-up notice, and that will be it.
Thanks, Jonathan. You got off easy today. Any questions? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly?
Thank you, through to you, Mr. Chair, to Jonathan. When we're within a fairly short distance of meters with the MDS, with the farm that's close by there, I realize we have to follow the rules. Is there any kind of leeway or grace period, or do you think they'll have to take the livestock out of the building, or we'll see with the application what they come forward with? But it seems like it's a fairly small amount of meters, that's all.
Through the chair to Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, it certainly is. But the thing with this particular amendment is the setback of 188 meters is built in the zoning bylaw as a site-specific zone. So it does require a zoning bylaw amendment. Unfortunately, there is really no leeway around that. And to reduce the MDS distance of 188 to which would presumably be 182, may require a change in the farming operation on 2217 Pigeon Lake Road. However, that would be up for that landowner to determine. The application itself pertains to the properties on Lakeview Crescent. So they're different property owners, to confirm. And I believe at this time, they just decided to not go through with it, given that it's only a 6 meter difference. If they come back down the road with something else, we could potentially entertain that. But as of right now, I have nothing. I don't know anything further.
Maybe Mr. Sharon, and then we're going to have to buy the cattle.
Yeah, it's chickens. So.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Mayor Latham, you had a question?
No, my question was answered. Thank you.
Thanks. So at this point, is there anybody from the public who wished to speak to this application or has a question regarding this application? Okay, so since it's been removed and there doesn't appear to be anybody online for the application, I think we should have a motion to receive the information presented. Mayor Latham, seconded by Mike Barkwell. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. So we'll move on to 3.2, an application to amend the OP zoning bylaw 93-30 at Carew Boulevard. Ian Walker.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to also be very quick here. This application pertains to a site-specific rezoning for the Springdale Gardens subdivision. The rezoning application notice was circulated to all landowners within 120 meters of the subject properties. You can see on the location map here, there are 4 blocks currently in this, and signs were posted on the property at the current ends of Lamb, Lawson, and Carew Boulevard. So this application just seeks to reduce the minimum front yard setback from 7.5 meters to 6 meters, and will increase lot coverage from 35% to 45%. As noted in the report, there is currently a holding provision on the existing R-2 zoning. However, there is a separate report going to council, currently tentatively scheduled for April 20th, which would be the same meeting considering this zoning bylaw amendment, to remove the holding provision from the R-2, and that is because servicing has been provided for this development to proceed. It will be 71 lots. This is what we call phases 3 and 4 of Springdale Gardens subdivision. This is the last remaining portion of the development to be built out. So really, with the passing of a bylaw here, it will just amend the 2 development standards. So if that goes forward to the April 20th council meeting, we will still have to send out the notice of passing after that date, and the bylaw would not become final and binding until the appeal period has expired, or if it's appealed until there's a settlement and a decision on that matter at the LPAT. But we're not anticipating any appeals to it. To date, no further comments have been received since writing the report. And therefore, staff are respectfully recommending that this application be referred to council for approval. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Do members of committee have any questions of Ian?
I do, Mr. Chair, if I can.
Go ahead, Mayor Latham.
Thank you. Ian, thanks for this. I have no issues with it. A couple of questions came up from last year, which was the construction access. I know there was a lot of complaints from some of the residents on Lamb Avenue about, mud on the roads, and the contractor wasn't really keeping it that clean. I can't confirm or deny. Is there some provision in place just for a construction entrance, or if they're using those existing entrances where there's homes already, is there some kind of conditions in here that they're required to at least try to keep it, keep the dirt down, I guess, as they're going in and out of these areas?
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the mayor. There would be requirements in the existing pre-servicing agreement that's been entered into with the developer. My understanding from recently reviewing the proposed draft development agreement that will go forward to council on April 20th is that the access will all be entirely through only Lamb Avenue. That means that they're keeping all the construction focused to just one entrance point. And there would be provisions within that development agreement that would require the developer to deal with sediment and erosion control issues, one being things like mud mats and that, where they're going in and out of the site, and the other would be, of course, keeping the existing roadway clean and free of debris. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions of Ian at this time? Seeing none, is there any members of the public wishing to speak to this application? Any members of the public wishing to speak to this application? Okay. Thomas, did you want to speak to the application?
I'd be happy to answer any committee or questions at this time, whether the members of the public that weren't present today contact Ian. I'd be happy to answer them and contact them directly to address any problems going forward.
Thanks, Thomas. So I'll just ask one last time if there's anybody from the public online wishing to speak to this application. And seeing none, committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly?
Yeah, just to follow up through you, Mr. Chair, to Thomas, it's good to see Greg return to Lindsay. It's back. He thought he left town there. You know, that he's ever coming back. But anyways, to see it. Were there many issues, or did you have to deal with any issues around the drilling and blasting? Because I know I had a couple calls, or a couple people I know live up there, and I didn't know if this is probably really maybe not as much to do with planning as it is with engineering. But
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for your comment, Deputy Mayor. I do believe there may be some. That will have to be a conversation that we have at the engineering stage. I know that it will be somewhat of a site-by-site or area-by-area basis as they go along Carew Boulevard as to whether they need to blast for the depths of the water and sewer. But as to the lot, I do not believe that we will need to do any blasting or significant area of blasting. If it will be a very minor trench for the water and sewer capabilities and storm sewer.
thank you.
Any further questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none, there's a recommendation before the committee. What would the committee's wishes be? Mayor Letham?
I'll move the recommendation proceed as printed.
Seconder for Mayor Letham's Deputy Mayor O'Reilly. So there's a motion that report plan 2021-015, registered plan 383, lots 61 to 68, 80 to 91, 94 to 116, 142 to 152, and part lot of 93 designated as part 208 57R-9054, part of lot 25, concession 5, geographic township of Ops, Bucar Investments Limited application be received, that the zoning bylaw amended substantially in the form attached as Appendix D to Report Plan 2021-015 be referred to Council for approval and adoption, and that the Mayor and Clerk be authorized to execute any documents required by the approval of this application. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. That brings us to 3.3, an application to amend the Lindsay zoning bylaw 2000-75 at 3 Pottinger Street. Mark LaHaye.
Good afternoon, members of Planning Advisory Committee. Notice for this application for a zoning bylaw amendment was given to each assessed landowner within 120 meters of the subject land and all applicable agencies and departments. A sign was posted on the property in accordance with the Planning Act. The subject property is located within an urban settlement area on the south side of Pottinger Street, east of William Street North, being a collector road in the former town of Lindsay. The owner has applied to permit the use of the existing residential building as a 5-unit residential dwelling, utilizing the existing parking area. The proposal will also seek to address a municipal law enforcement office occurrence by legalizing and registering the 4 existing dwelling units while ensuring compliance with the building code and fire safety regulations with enhancements to the features of the building. Various documents and plans were submitted by the applicant in support of the proposed amendment, and staff have reviewed the planning justification report and that other supporting documentation, and it has evaluated the application in the context of applicable zone provisions and policies, and generally accepts the planning rationale that's been given. Since the writing of this report, comments have been received from the municipal law enforcement officer on March 29th, indicating no comments that would prohibit or delay this from going through. In addition, comments were received from the Economic Development Division, noting no concerns. Comments are outstanding from Fire Services, Community Services, and the Kawartha Region Conservation Authority, although staff are not anticipating any issues. We also require confirmation from the Public Works Roads Operations Division staff that the entrance is suitable and in compliance with the city's bylaw to regulate access to a municipal right-of-way, and that an access permit could be granted upon successful completion of the rezoning application. The application has been reviewed in consideration of comments from the circulated departments and external agencies, relevant provincial policies, the official plan, and the Town of Lindsay zoning bylaw. The application demonstrates consistency with the provincial policy statement in conformity to the growth plan and official plan. The proposed zoning amendment is intended to permit and facilitate the use of the existing residential building as a 5-unit residential dwelling, utilizing the existing parking area in accordance with an implementing zoning bylaw, which would need to include site-specific development standards that would be required to recognize such provisions as a reduced side yard setback to the existing building, a reduced number of required parking spaces, driveway width, landscape strip, and minimum dwelling unit floor area. In conjunction with the rezoning of the property, a plans-only site plan approval would also be required, as has been identified through the pre-consultation process. In consideration of the comments and evaluation contained within the report, staff recommends that the application respecting the proposed zoning amendment be referred back to staff until such time as all comments have been received and addressed from the circulated agencies, city departments, and public, and for further review and processing. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Is there any questions of Mark from committee? Mayor Latham?
Mr. Chair, I think you know where I'm going to ask you, Mark. This one seems pretty straightforward, just in my opinion, and you're saying in anticipation of no issues that you think might come forward. Any that do might be able to be handled at site plan. Is there any way that we could approve this approval recommendation to council, and if anything pops up between now and council, we could change the recommendation then, but assuming that it doesn't, move it forward at this point, or am I pushing you too hard on this one?
Like I said, comments that are outstanding from KRCA and Fire Services really didn't point to any issues or concerns during the pre-consultation process. So I'm not anticipating any issues following through with that. Fire Services comments were really being required to or requiring a building permit ultimately to be issued to address the fire and building code requirements for the purposes of the recognizing and creation of the dwelling units. And as far as Public Works, we are just waiting for their comments with respect to whether the entrance is suitable, the existing entrance is suitable to be used as a 5-unit dwelling in accordance with the city's bylaw. So it really is up to Planning Advisory Committee, but there are only a few details that will need to be worked out just in terms of the zoning bylaw amendment, but I would not have any issues if should committee decide if they wanted to move that forward. Like I said, we would just be recognizing a few provisions, including reduced side yard, reduction in the number of parking spaces, the driveway width, the landscaping strip requirements, and minimum dwelling unit floor area for the most part.
Okay, fair enough. That's what I wanted to know. Thanks, Mark. I just want to make sure you weren't going to call me an hour from now and yell at me. So thank you.
Is there any further questions of Mark? Seeing none, does the applicant, owner, or agent on behalf of the applicant wish to talk to the application?
Mr. Chairman, it's Kevin Duguay. I'm assuming the committee and staff are able to hear me, yes?
Yep, go ahead, Kevin.
I'd like to start off by congratulating Mr. Hawley on his acting directorship title. I noticed that, so congratulations, Mr. Hawley. To the committee members, this application was filed with the municipality on October 1st, 2020. We've been working with planning staff to secure a required rezoning approval to address a bylaw enforcement initiative dealing with the existing 4-unit use. Now, it's my understanding that this house was converted from a single unit to a 4-unit use years ago to accommodate a wave of refugees that were received and accepted in the Lindsay and Kawartha Lakes communities. And so it's quietly existed as a 4-unit use for some time. My clients, in response to the bylaw enforcement initiative, reached out, retained my services, and also retained the services of Neil Campbell, architect, Peterborough. We have prepared the required floor plans, concept plan to demonstrate that this site can readily and easily accommodate 4 units, and there's room for a 5th unit. In a housing market, if your community is anything like Peterborough, there's a huge demand for small apartments in the sort of the urban parts of your community and Peterborough community. I'd like to speak to some of the comments, specifically to Mayor Letham. I concur. It would be our preference that this application proceed for recommendation. There is no technical issue holding up its advancement. The Conservation Authority in the July 25th, 2019 pre-consultation meeting indicated they had no concerns with this application, and there's no physical development occurring. The parking lot exists, the parking area exists, the building exists. We're internalizing the 5th unit. Insofar as the fire department, which we're awaiting their comments, they've indicated that it could be addressed through a building permit. Mr. Campbell, our project architect, has assured myself and the property owner that the building can meet all applicable OBC and fire safety regulatory requirements. I note that insofar as agencies, planning, building, engineering, economic development have basically all offered their concurrence. So the key commenting agencies have extended their comments, essentially saying this application should be able to proceed. We have note that there would be a requirement for a plans-only site plan, really reinforcing the plan that you would have been provided as part of our application. So that is not a formidable step for us to address, and we would be happy to continue to work with Mr. Leahy and staff in that regard. I would be available to respond to any its full commentary. As Mayor Letham indicated, our preference would be to have this matter proceed as to council with the implementing bylaw being considered at your next regular meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, staff. Thank you, committee members. I'm available to respond to questions.
Thanks, Kevin. Committee, any questions of Kevin? Seeing none, are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this application at this time? Okay. I think the owner of the property is on the line. Is there anything you wish to speak to, Joanne?
No, I'm good with that.
Okay. Is there any other members of the public wishing to speak to this application? Third and final time, any other members of the public wishing to speak to this application? Seeing none, committee, what are your wishes? Mayor Latham?
I'll give you the motion that the report be received and that the zoning bylaw amendment be referred to council for approval and adoption, and the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute any documents required by the approval of this application.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly. Any discussion? Calling the question. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. So at this point, that concludes the public portion of today's meeting. We'll now move into item 4, deputations, which there are none. Item 5, we have no correspondence. So item 6, regular and returned reports. 6.1, we've got Woodland Hills Community Inc. amending subdivision agreement. Richard Hawley.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Richard. Go ahead.
We had some technical difficulties. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of committee. This matter is dealing with the Woodland Hills subdivision. Development here started approximately 20 years ago, and we're at the final stretch. There was a rezoning application that was submitted last year for approval, which dealt with some reconfiguration of some lots to accommodate new stormwater management infrastructure, and it also dealt with the harmonization of some of the zoning between the Manvers Township Bylaw and the Oak Ridges Moraine zoning bylaw as well. We've also, during that time, in December, January, the conditions of draft plan approval for the subdivision were revised and sort of brought into a state where we could clear the conditions. We also added transfers for the stormwater infrastructure as well. We have been working with the developer on a subdivision agreement, and we have reached an agreement on that subdivision agreement. That agreement is attached to my report. Meets all of our objectives, and I believe we have concurrence with the developer. That's my submission. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Any questions of Richard, Deputy Mayor O'Reilly?
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair, to I guess, Richard. Any problems negotiating the reduction in securities?
It was we went through a process with the owner, so it's all part of the process. So not any different than other files.
I think you're more of a politician than us. Thank you, Richard.
Any other questions for Richard? Okay, we've got a recommendation before us. What would committee like to do? Councillor Seymour Fagan?
As printed.
Is there a seconder for Councillor Seymour Fagan's motion? Mike Barkwell. Any discussion? Okay, so the motion reads that report plan 2021-018 Woodland Hills Community Inc. amending subdivision agreement be received, that the amending subdivision agreement for Woodland Hills, City of Kawartha Lakes, substantially in the form attached as Appendix C to report plan 2021-018 be approved by council, that the reduction of securities be considered based on the review by staff of the completed works, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute any documents and agreements required by the approval of this agreement. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. I believe that brings us to the end of our agenda. Sure. I see that our new committee member, Wayne Brumwell's joined us partway through. Do you want to say hello, Wayne?
Hi, everyone. My apologies. I lost my internet just when I went to sign on, so it took me all this time to get it back up.
No worries, Wayne. These things
Get better
happen.
the next time.
No worries, Wayne. These things happen. Maybe you'd like to make the motion to adjourn today.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Is there a seconder for Wayne's motion? Kathleen Seymour Fagan, all in favor? Motion carries. Thanks everyone for your time.
I thought maybe Wayne hadn't got his security checks in, maybe that was the issue.
No, actually, Pat, Bell Canada decided to do some work on a street yesterday, and